Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm, in my series of tabletop RPG discussions. I want to talk about something that I don't really think a lot of people in the TTRPG space really talk enough about, and that is the style of game. And like people talk about like cyberpunk or high fantasy, low fantasy, age of exploration, all that jazz. But I think that these are genres, and those are really at the end of the day like fluff setting. Like what does a cyberpunk story mean? Is it heavy action? Is it heavy intrigue? Is it world building? Is all these things? And like the answer is whatever you want it to be. But I think that there's something a little more though a little more helpful in letting people decide what tabletop role playing game they would like to play. And this idea was thrown about on a website a long time ago called The Forge. It was like a tabletop RPG forum, and I was there. I know how toxic and gatekeepy and tribalist it was, but I think that there was something. They were onto something there when they were talking about three types of role playing games, three types of games. And I think these are actually very useful categories. Every role playing game out there is some combination of these three things. Just some lean more into certain styles than others. And from now on, if I do RPG reviews, I will try to explain like, is it predominantly type A, type B, then type C? Like, predominantly. So the three types are simulationists, gamist, narrativist. So I'd be like, oh, like Danger Patrol is probably narrativist first, simulationist second, and gamist third. Like there's a game, but the game is really simple. It is get a collection of dice, tell your DM how many are a 4 or higher and how many are a 3 or less, and then he'll tell you what happens and how much damage you take and things like that. So there's not a whole lot of game in that game, but there's a lot of free form elements that let you kind of control the narrative. Like one of the archetypes, the aliens have an ability called Secrets of My Homeworld. And what does that do? It does whatever you think Secrets of Your Homeworld would do in accordance to this particular game. So the three types of, I would call them styles in game, would be simulationist, gamist, and narrativist. And if you kind of understand what these three things mean, it can actually kind of help you pick a game that's good for your group. And there are games out there that people talk about, and there was a podcast I listened to a while ago, and I was kind of got me thinking about this, and very much they fell into Ivory Tower game design, and that's going to be a topic for another day. Trust me, I'm going to talk about Ivory Tower game design. But I don't listen to the podcast anymore. The guy called everyone who plays Dungeons and Dragons a racist, and I really wasn't about that. Like, I really didn't want to support that kind of just base. If you don't play the kind of games I want to play, you are bad. Because that's what it was. The podcast was very, very much obsessed with Powered by the Apocalypse games. And so, very much it gave off the vibe of, if you don't play these particular types of games, like Powered by the Apocalypse and some other ones. And trust me, it's nothing against Powered by the Apocalypse. I've never played it. Books I've read haven't really clicked with me, but I'm going to give it a shot. Not really my thing, but people who like Powered by the Apocalypse, that doesn't make you, I'm not playing this game where it's like, well, mine is good and yours is bad. Because it's not the case. PBTA just doesn't hit me. Or it never has. I'm willing to try, though. If somebody wanted to run a PBTA game, I'd be willing to give it a shot. Anyway, but they talk about games like Jason Morningstar's Fiasco. And I really, really like Fiasco. But I don't think it's a tabletop role-playing game. I think it's fun. It's a fun activity. It's great, like, writing prompt, great creative writing prompt. But to me, tabletop role-playing game should have a game element. And there's no real win state in Fiasco. Like, a game element to me should have to have some kind of win state. And please do not misinterpret that as me saying that Dungeons & Dragons is about winning. But there is one state, when that, Elder Blue Dragon shows up, the win state is beating that Elder Blue Dragon. Or the win state is convincing the king to, let you go investigate his vizier. You can win and lose. Now, as a group, you win or lose. It's like a comparative game. Like, I think the game's called Forbidden Island, where it's not a tabletop role-playing game, it's a board game, where you play, all 4 players have roles, and the island's slowly sinking, and you're trying to excavate treasure before the island slowly sinks. And it's a game with the win and lose state, but everyone, there is, unlike, like, let's say, Uno, where when you play Uno, there's a person who wins. The win state in Forbidden Island is everyone's shared win, everyone's shared lose state. And that's how it is with Dungeons and Dragons. Or any tabletop role-playing game, honestly. There are win states. And man, the pupils in my eyes look really cool in this lighting. I'm digging it. Sorry, digression. It's part of who I am. Anyway, so I lost topic. But anyway, so we're talking about the types of role-playing games there are. So games like Fiasco I don't really consider, or Keymaster, things like that. But you look at the games, and so what are simulationist games? And these are games that are meant to simulate something, whether it is... Now, I've expanded this a little bit. Traditional simulationist games had a lot of, like, wargaming stuff, like, oh no, this game needs to mimic reality as closely as possible. I'm not sure that's the case, because I think that in a lot of ways, like, Steve Jackson's Tune, I think, is very much simulationist. It's not mimicking a reality, but everything in the game, from the way it's written, to the way the rules work, to how the game kind of plays out, is meant to simulate a Looney Tunes cartoon. And is really specifically like Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, things like that. I find that's what it's meant to be. And I know cartoons are much, much more wide and variety than that, but it is Looney Tunes. The game mechanics are kind of wonky. Like, they even have, like, because everything's D6, have, like, D6 percentile tables where you roll 2D6 and you generate a result from 11 to 66, using 2 different colored D6s. Weird, but whatever. I mean, it doesn't matter because the game is meant to be a silly representation of cartoon. There's not a whole lot of advancement in the game, because generally speaking, how it works is cats. How it works is you dropped into a scenario, you're Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, and you're dealing with Yosemite Sam, and now you're, trying to deal with him, and then next time you play, maybe you're dropped into, like, a opera tragedy, like the infamous Bugs Bunny one where he dies at the end. And, they don't intermix. You're not creating a huge structured story. You're building little, basically 15-minute comedy sets, because you're a Looney Tunes cartoon, you're a Tom and Jerry skit, you know what I mean? So, like, Toon is, to me, a simulationist game. Everything is meant to simulate Toon reality. Versus, there are games out there like Phoenix Command, like, I'd even say Mech Warrior, that are very gritty, realistic, meant to mimic this realistic realism. And so, like, if you're the kind of person who, like, you get really into, like, how the world functions and things like, oh, I want to be able to feel the physics. I want to be able to feel the way that kind of the things within the world interact, and how deep can I immerse myself into this concept of being a mech pilot, of being a Looney Tunes cartoon, of being a soldier in World War I. You're probably looking at games that are heavily... My camera messes up. The cats are messing with the tablecloth. I'm sitting at the dining room table, and the cats are messing with the table. Hey, quit that! Sorry. But you probably want a simulationist style game. Then there's gamist games. And Dungeons and Dragons is a gamist game. When you play Dungeons and Dragons, more than anything, you are interacting with game mechanics. You know, it's all about you roll a d20 and the game is entirely about altering this 20-sided die to come up with the result that you want. You know, a lot of games like that. People argue PBTA is a very narrative. I think PBTA is kind of gamist, but okay. But the big one, Dungeons Dragons, GURPS is heavy gamist with simulationist. Rifts is very much a gamist game. There's no real reality to it. It is very much about interacting with these skill percentages. A lot of traditional role-playing games tend to be gamist and simulationist. In the first edition Dungeons and Dragons, there was this idea that characters were disposable because there was an idea that you wouldn't attach yourself to a character, you'd attach yourself to like this world, this you know, how this guy fits into this world for a little bit, he dies, someone else takes his place. So like traditional game design, there wasn't very much a narrative element. Like Dungeons and Dragons was very much go into a dungeon, kill some monsters, get some gold, get stronger. Go into a dungeon, kill monsters, get gold, get stronger. Kill monsters, get gold, get into heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier dungeons. It's kind of this building building powers. And Dungeons and Dragons never really left that. Certainly there are more narrativist elements than there used to be. But even like narrativist elements, like in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, the backgrounds aren't really meant for narrative. You pick a background that gives you a skill or a ability you want more than you actually do based on who your character is or was. And then there are narrativist games. And I tend toward narrativist games. Like I said, Danger Patrol is a good one. PBTA, I'd argue, kind of. Another one that I think is very narrativist is My Little Pony, Tales of Equestria. It's like you have 3 stats, roll but it's mostly just about I want to do this. Is it okay? Well, is it physical? Is it mental? Is it social? And so, White Wolf games are very gamist, despite what people who play White Wolf tell you. But generally, you'll see a lot of the gamist games being rules like they'll tend to be like books that thick. But you know, this idea of if you're a gamist, you're somebody who sits down and you're looking at, okay, how do I get these numbers to make what I want? How do I make my barbarian do as much damage with his axe as I possibly can? I want him to hit. I want him to hit hard. You're probably gamist. And narrativist, if you're the kind of person who just likes to make characters, and it's more, and you interact with the world, but it's less about interacting with the world in this kind of, how do I interact with the world, and more, how do I fit into the world? How does my character story progress? How do their interactions with NPCs progress? Like, I want to build a character, and I want them to fall in love. I want them to rebel against, an evil emperor. I want them to find a home in this city. Then you're probably heavily into narrativist games. And one of the big things about the Forge that was toxic was this argument of which one's the right way to play. That is absolutely a defeatist, self-defeating mindset to have. Because once you start breaking people into these camps and you say, okay, 33% of you, 33.3 repeating percent of you are wrong. Sorry, actually be 66.66.6 repeating percent of you are wrong. The 33.3 repeating percent of people here, we are the right type of gamers. You're the wrong type of gamers. You have alienated huge swaths of people who could possibly join in RPGs. I know there's arguments about gatekeeping within role-playing games, and I do think that there should be anytime you've got something, there should be an element of gatekeeping. If only because this is something that exists and it's a niche hobby. This is something that is a fun thing for us. So you get people, I don't really want to do math. Like, I like the idea of, you know, storytelling, but I don't really want to, you know, yeah, at its core, math is a part of the game simply because you have to know when you succeed and fail, because if you're going to succeed or fail at your whims, which I've seen some games try, and they don't really hit me. They don't really like click with me, because I'm like, okay, but like sometimes you're going to fail, and if you're just failing or succeeding based on when you want to, how are you really like getting involved in this game? Like, it's not a game anymore. You're just writing a story. And that's fine if you want to do collaborative storytelling, Fiasco, first edition. But that's not really a game. And tabletop role-playing games are tabletop role-playing games. There is role-playing, but there is games. So, and this is kind of the things with the Ivory Tower. Hey, quit. Ivory Tower game design I talked about, where these people are like, oh, we're trying to bring you through a narrative experience. Well, maybe I don't want a narrative experience. Maybe I just want to bap a zombie in the head with a sharp bit of metal. Maybe that's what I'm after. But I digress. But, like, you don't want to, like, completely gatekeep so many people who would enjoy this experience. And even if they don't love the math element, if they can tolerate the math element, if they're just, okay, even I've played with people who are less about the math and more just, okay, this is the number I got, and then maybe somebody sitting beside them will be like, okay, that's this number altogether. And I have players like that, and that's fine, because they do fun when they're fun in their own way. They're fun in other ways. And but like if you're just saying, oh, well, you want a game that's doesn't have, you want, if you're only in the game for, realism, then you need to get out of here. And it's like, but why, if realism helps me feel a part of the world? For example, playing Dungeons and Dragons, there's things like some of the weapons where it's like, okay, well, the big ones I can think of Dungeons and Dragons is unarmed strikes. Oh, well, you're not proficient with... Why? Third edition was so bad about this. You're not proficient with an unarmed strike. Okay, so I can use any weapon. I can use swords, spears, axes, hammers, flails, bows and arrows, crossbows, throwing knives, throwing darts, without any issue. But throwing a hook at somebody is too much for me. Like, I'm a fighter. Like, if you think that as a fighter I've never been in a brawl before, then you just don't know anything. And so my favorite story is about Pathfinder, where they're talking about making a chain that you would tie to your wrist, and you could attach it to like a sword hilt. And if you got disarmed, you could flip it back up and catch it, which is cool. And I would argue that some of the realism in it's kind of wonky, because having this big chain would offer a hook that people could use to yank, pull, get an extra guard in, make it easier for them to disarm. But it's like, well, I couldn't do it with a mouse. I'm like, yeah, get the game creator tied a mouse around his wrist and was trying to flip it up and catch it. And it's like, well, it's unrealistic. Not really, dude. Like, no, you're just unathletic. You're a game designer. You're not a martial artist. And it's like the argument of how many attacks should a fighter get in a round? Should a fighter be able to get 3-4 attacks in a 6-second span of time? Like, there's an argument about realistically could they, and people get kind of I have my own thoughts about that, but people are kind of upset. Like, as a fighter, I can boom, boom, boom. These trained sword fighters, like good trained sword fighters. Cell Swords Arts kind of did a thing where they were showing how often they could launch attacks at each other within a 6 second time span. And I get it. It's like, if that idea that you're not being able to throw as many attacks as you think you should be able to in a 6 second time span takes you kind of out of the game, I get it, because it's the same with in Pathfinder First Edition. They're like, I'll sunder your material components bag. Now you can't cast spells. Okay, I can't cast spells. Why can't I cast spells? So in my head, how setting spells work is, so it's like, okay, say a spell requires like 50 words of power and 12 symbols. So you're saying you say 48 of the words of power, and you make 11 of the symbols, and you take that pinch of powder while you're doing that, and boof, it's there. And then when you cast the spell, you say the last 2 words of power, you make the final gesture, and the spell goes off because you have this ritual stored, and then you finally complete it. But it's like, I cut your pouch open. I'm like, so in the middle of battle, I have a pouch that's got bat guano, charcoal, coins, bits of metal, bits of glass, feathers, spider eggs. There's all this crap in this big pouch of mine, and you just cut it open, everything spills on the floor. Okay, so in the middle of a fight, in 6 seconds, how am I digging through this giant sack of eggs and feathers and, rodent shit to get that, bit of glass, that tiny little rod of glass I need to finish my spell? Okay, do I just have 100 pouches around me? Okay, this is the one with bat guano. This is the one with new eggs. Hey, come on. Why don't you get out of that? This is the one with spider web. This is the one with, beams so I can cast gust of wind, because that's literally just a fart joke. In which case, I sunder your material component pouch. Okay, but all you did was you cut open the one that had spider webs in it. Okay, I'm not going to cast web this time. And that so greatly bothers me in Pathfinder First Edition. Like, it really drives me nuts, because, like, it is so immersion breaking to me to think that this wizard in 6 seconds is digging through a sack this big for 1 pinch of bat guano. Because in my head, it is just, okay, I dig through, I get my bat guano out, and that 8-hour rest, the hour you spend setting spells, that's when I dig my bat guano out, because I have an hour to set these spells. And, even if I'm doing 12 spells, I'm like, okay, there's a spider web for that spell, there's a bat guano for that spell, there is the, pinch of charcoal for that spell, and now I can, I've got them all lined up, I can, get this one set, get this one set, get this one set, get this one set. So, the idea that games need to have some simulationist element to it is still there, even in games that are, say, high fantasy. And it's one of infinite arguments you get into about things in the game, like, should this realistically happen? And I'm like, I think that there is an argument, and I've made this argument, and it's somewhat disingenuous, I'll admit, but it's kind of things I get to, and mostly just when people are being, like, sexist, racist, ableist. Well, there shouldn't be any women fighters. I mean, it's not realistic. Like, okay, you don't want women shouldn't have the same strength stat as a male, because it's unrealistic. Okay, and now when you're talking about this realism, this cat girl ninja, this bird person barbarian, and my elf wizard are gonna go beat up this dragon for a magic sword. Yeah, sorry, dude. Realism doesn't really handle that argument well. But I also somewhat, maybe not that, because that's just rooted in bigotry. But, like, I also get things like the material component pouch is, like, me, personally. It bothers me so much because it just is immersion breaking, and it's just a stupid trick. But, that is a part of the game, so, you have this infinite argument about where does the simulation begin, where does it end, because that's end somewhere. Because reality is dumb and pointless. And there are how much game mechanics do you want? Do you want the mechanics to guide the game like in Dungeons and Dragons, or do you want them to get out of the way so you can really do things like in Tales of Equestria? I think there's a Power Rangers that uses almost identical system. I need to find that game. That looks fun. And there was a narrative because you were playing a character. Even in the crunchiest, most realistic game, you're still a character. And even if that character is expected to die, there's still a character there. And then somebody else you'll play come in, and the story will continue. And even in Steve Jackson's Tune, where you're expected to play one shots, within that one shot, there is still a story there. Within that 15-minute episode of generic cartoon show, there's a narrative that goes from A to B. It's just a very short-term one and not a very massive long-term one. But I think ultimately, if you understand, I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. I'm almost half an hour in. The cats are being bad today. I think ultimately, if you understand what you're looking for in a game, you can find a game that more caters to how you want to play. Because, like I said, Dungeons and Dragons, if you find the game mechanics, like the mechanical elements, like trying to remember what stat does what, how does attack rolls work, how do saving throws work, how do skills work, well, what does this spell do, what does this weapon special property do. If you find that overwhelming but you still enjoy like the role playing and the world building elements, there might be better options, rules like options for you. If you find yourself getting obsessed with like weapon drop age or things like that in D&D, like, oh, well, it just doesn't make sense, realistically speaking, that, you just get a -2 for range, arrow droppage, what about, all this cover and resistance and all this stuff. Maybe a bit more simulationist game might be good for you. And, obviously, if you're super into, like, the mechanical elements of the game, maybe a game closer to Dungeons & Dragons. Or if you don't want to support Dungeons & Dragons, because God knows I'm not supporting Dungeons & Dragons. I'm not supporting Wizards of the Coast anymore. After the Pinkerton incident, which I will not stop reminding people about, because this company sent soldiers to a kid's house over playing cards. But, GURPS. GURPS is kind of... GURPS is a game, but games like Palladium games, because that's the game I'm running right now, is a Palladium fantasy game. It's got issues. I'm enjoying it, but it's got issues. But things like that, things like maybe a White Wolf game would be good for you. Like World of Darkness is the popular one, but I've always preferred Exalted or Scion from White Wolf. Onyx Road now. They're Onyx Road now. But yeah, so I guess next time I'll see you. Maybe next time I will start. I don't know if next time I'm going to do a game review or talk about Ivory Tower game design. If you have any thoughts about what you want me to talk about when it comes to tabletop role-playing games, go ahead and leave me a comment on any of the videos, because Josh, who runs this channel, I'm sure will tell me. And I check in on these comments in these videos sometimes fairly regularly, just to kind of see if anybody's saying anything, which they're not, because nobody watches these. But if you happen to watch it and you happen to want a topic for me to talk about, just go ahead and drop it. I'll work it into my schedule. I have no problems talking about any of these gaming topics. I've been playing for probably, I'm trying to think, I started when I was in middle school. Probably close to 40 years now? Maybe 35, 40 years? So I've got some experience in it. But anyway, I guess I will see you next time. Try to get these videos out about once a week. So hopefully next week I will see you guys again. Bye.